capacities. They mark the zone where the force is in the process of striking. I'll play it now, I think.
Actually, I have a copy.
Got lots of writing on it, but it sort of follows on from, I guess, what irrigation chair. It sort of follows on from what I guess we've been doing a lot with Aaron and Timothy to a certain degree, but also for me as a trombonist, is Klaus K. Hubler's way of sort of breaking up the score into various physical parameters, the lips, the slide, the overtones. This is a little, in sort of a simplified version than the Klaus K. Hubler Churka, but this is, but it probably is a little more succinct in that way too. So yeah. I was just listening to Carl talk about perhaps the interaction with the audience. In this piece, I'm not really thinking, it's not so much in the performance of each bit, it's in the rests that's where you would, how far you want to push that. And the variation in the rest is quite extreme. Sometimes that last one I think says 22 seconds to 45, and depending how I feel, I've had a coffee before that. Speaking, I don't think I'm going to last. But there's certain, that's the same, it's an interesting interaction, particularly how much you can hold that and feel relatively stable. So that's probably that point. And again, there's the pitch isn't defined, so the choices I'm making aren't. In learning it, I think I did decide on a sense of where the range was going to be, how high it's going to be, and I'm not using any pedal notes in playing it, which I think was an indication on the score. I think it was. And the same thing, there's other pieces, there's the Cargill R10 where you sort of, again, have this sense of the score being a kind of the height of the score being a sense of the range of the instrument, and normally in working on those things, it's nice to get a sense of quite where a middle note in the range is, so you can push that. And then there's a certain degree where you, in performance, depending how physically tired you might be, then some of the higher notes, that might get a little bit compressed for the sake of the power of it, and then sometimes you push it too far and you go past a point where you can be powerful enough to get the piece. So that there's sort of dangers in the performance of the piece in the way you choose to do it. So.
Is there when you're choosing the upper extreme of the range, do you choose it with that in mind, that you want it to be safe across the duration of the piece, or do you choose it in a way that you choose it at all?
Yeah.
Where you want it to be dangerous? I'm asking partly because Aaron has a vocal piece which I've performed a few times. Yeah. And in that piece, the pitch is fed into the singer's ear from a computer. And you program into the computer your vocal range and stuff. Yeah. But of course, the vocal range, if you're going to have it sort of safe under all conditions, it's really not very big at all. On the other hand, if it's quite wide, then that could be quite interesting as far as the evolution of the piece goes.
Yeah, I mean, part of the program note, the reference to Bacon, is this idea of these lines of force moving through the piece. So physically, if I'm tired and I'm screaming for a top note, I feel, in a way, that conveys something of that sense anyway. The sort of fracture of the sound, or the straining for the sound, is something that Aaron certainly, well, it's not really Aaron, it's Aaron's program note for this piece is a bunch of sort of quotes about the Bacon piece. So it certainly intersects that in some way. So I feel that physical extreme it reveals something about the piece and about I think his intentions with the piece.
Is there any way I could persuade you to do a safe and a dangerous version of the particular?
No. That's easy. You did that.
Do you intentionally change the scale or like the ratio over the piece to kind of give you that extra lift?
It's actually fairly. Now I've done it a few times, it does feel a little bit more defined on some notes, on some bits, which I enjoy. And then when I was practicing it today, there were different things, and I was like, it's odd. I kind of take. So every take of the piece is a new journey through it, and you find more things. And I don't know if it's more things or just different things, but it's fun.
I've forgotten if you answered this question really. Does he intend the range to be defined and consistent over the course of the piece?
Yes and no.
Does he specify that?
No, because it's a little tricky with this piece as well, because he has a very fluid line for the overtone series, and of course on the trombone. It gets the overtones are much closer as you get higher. So a smooth line from relatively low is really... so it doesn't look like, it doesn't sound like it looks a little. So
is there any interstitial effect between those two notes?
Yeah, well, you can sort of bend pitches around and things, but there's often not enough time in the piece for that sort of thing, whatever sort of comes out. But yeah, and I'm sure that's I don't try to make that too obvious. I think that would be to point out probably a difficulty or something with the piece. But I think
you don't focus in on that issue at any point.
No, there's moments in the piece where the slide is still.
Yeah.
And then it moves at the end or something. So you get some odd little overtone things that come through the piece. So there's a reference to the trombone, I think, anyway, in that sense in the piece. And I think that's important to understand the piece.
Can you say something about how you take the main expressive indications, brittle, embarrassingly awkward, and so on? How much of those do you think are already built into the gestures as they're written or constructed? How much do they alter or even contradict what you would be doing anyway?
I think with Aaron's music, they do sort of support, the writing of the piece and these indications support what he's written, particularly probably more the dynamic side of things. Also, it's probably also that question of range when we're thinking about, when I'm talking about the physical limits, so that brittleness can certainly come into it. One thing we modified when I was working on the piece is my throat flutter's terrible. Maybe it's being Australian or something, but it's not using much. Yeah, but you're different. But it's so we talked about just sort of the just sort of singing through it as the way of creating a resistance that he was after. So. And that sort of seemed to reinforce a lot of what he was saying as well. I mean, I take a lot of that stuff too. At least when I'm learning the piece, I think at that stage I really try to focus in on that, and in the performance I think hopefully it comes through in some way. Actually, I was going to say something, Carl, because you were talking about the way learning a piece, and you were asking about fragments and learning fragments. And it's very, the way I tend to learn a piece like this or like Tim's piece or any other piece, I think, is that I tend to do a lot of detail work on like the first maybe 8 bars or something of a piece, and really try to understand the language. And this doesn't work for every piece, but with a piece like this, with thinking about formal structure, and Tim's piece as well, where it's sort of his language extends through the piece. Then once I feel I know that language, then I feel I can move to the rest of the piece quite quickly. So it's sort of a process I've been engaged with in learning these sort of pieces, is trying to get a sense of what that is, the language, and then sort of look at how that goes through the piece to get a sense of the structure. Yeah.
How much does do the discoordinated irrational values on the different parameters affect your performance? I mean, how do you think that?
Oh yeah, that I guess there's two, with Tim McCormick, I see him in sort of related to this. He sort of started to get rid of the irrationals and did it in the favour of a graphic score. And I guess that's, when I saw that, I sort of thought that sort of is how I approach it. I think sometimes there's specific rhythmic relationships that might have some kind of character to them, or might be something important. In this piece, I wasn't really thinking so much about that as much as I was thinking about the characterisation of the slide movement and the overtones that we were talking about before, as offering a window into the instrument as opposed to the...
some of the rhythms are very specific in
lower
parameters, but by the nature of the beast, as it were, it's it's very difficult, let's say, to imagine someone playing them precisely, because it doesn't begin and end. It's something that comes together.
And the triggers just is rattling while I'm not doing anything, and this is the same in the Hugler piece where there's mute, put the mute on, you're not playing anything. So I'm certainly influenced by that piece in this piece. So, and the rhythmic values, in this piece I much more did it more through the metronome and understanding quite where the beat structure is, and then working through that, and so that there's that relationship, and at the start there's a beat bop bop, there's a little quintuplet at the end, things like that I like. They're more articulated things that make sense with them, certainly.
How do you think irrationals though? I mean, I'm famous for writing all sorts of irrationals, but like the quartet always turns the into, the ideal quartet always turns into tempi.
Oh, tempi, yeah, no.
You don't do that.
We did in terrain when we called it terrain. We have to. and the character of the music is so strong in the brass bits we have, and it's fantastic. But it's and that was much more, it seemed, about tempo, like between three of us. Individually, I don't. If it made sense, I would, I think. But normally with a lot of these things, it doesn't seem. I don't think I've ever had a piece that seemed to work in that way, structurally.
It seems to me that, that's just my take, that changing tempo is a rather radical thing. It's not something you do every measure just to accommodate certain irrational values.
No, I should talk. Richard Barrett, that's the one that does that. Basel, that does have a constant tempo change written into it, in a way of kind of avoiding the layered and layered irrationals. I think I'm not quite sure how he can. I think he's really conceived it as gradual slowing down, and and this the sense through that piece is quite strong, and that it really does work to feel that the sort of Cumoso sort of aspect of it. You think, push it, and particularly with that piece where it's a very dense piece. So that's certainly one of those instances where the tempo change is written in and you really feel it, and it's great. Yeah.
Well, I think that's important, isn't it? I mean, over a certain amount of time, Ramantanda or Chalarando changes the sort of difficulty degree of a performance.
Yeah.
And or the degree of effort or whatever it is you have to put into it.
That's right.
So even if you don't really hear the tempo slowing down or speeding up as such, you hear something happening.
Yeah. It asks it, and like you're saying, it draws you into a relationship with the piece in a different way, which is great. Yeah. In this case, it doesn't really have much of. It's one tempo throughout, and I mean that's another reason for thinking with the irrationals. It really is this and that, and the effect of the piece is much in the silence, perhaps, as the connection with the piece.
Do you think of the piece as a fairly classical piece?
Yeah, actually I do. Gesturally,
yeah. If I look at the score, I see the piece going through all the permutations of what's in the foreground and what's in the background, where you constrain doing something, where you don't, where you're using certain positions, where you're using the meter.
Yeah.
It's very classical in that respect.
Yeah. No, and gesturally, the sort of it's very easy in an odd way. I find the same with Tristram's trumpet solo too. It's very raw, very sort of very brassy. Maybe he's got brass players in mind in that respect. Gestural, yeah.
How do you interpret the silences in terms of how they kind of relate to the larger form as well as in context with what is on either side of them in terms of like the character? Because I see like at the end he kind of specifies exactly how he wants you to be standing because he wants it, and how you have to have a facial expression. So I'm wondering like how you're thinking about creating some sort of effect.
Yeah, definitely the quality of the silence in relation to that. Yeah, it's. I guess I mean today was a bit more spontaneous. I don't think I really thought it out as much as I probably did the first one. It's on YouTube. That one's probably more relevant. But definitely, it's I guess how the material that you've just played sort of has that resonance, as much for me as for the audience, I guess. And you think, well, how long does that take to process, and then how long can you go further than that? And there's always a sort of a minimum duration you can wait, so you've got to at least get to that point anyway. So sometimes that minimum duration sort of stretches the time already.
Well, not even in terms of the duration, in terms of what you're doing during that time.
The character, yeah. I mean, basically it's just freezing. And there's other points in the piece where I don't play anything, but he's got the movement of the slide very slowly down to indicate that it's not one of those. So there has to be some kind of delineation between I'm completely frozen or there's something slightly moving. So, yeah, that's... it's trying to make it very clear that there's a pause, like literally getting sort of stuck, as opposed to not like a pause. It's always a kind of that pause. You know, it's that quality of time where it is put pause on the cassette player as opposed to the, you know, there's a silence. Yeah, but that's sort of what he's after. Yeah, just a fracture. Yeah.
That was like I was in this piece following the release of the trombone's envelope in a room. So how do you prevent? So every silence is going to have a very potential sort of character.
Yeah.
And you allow that. That's kind of built into the piece, which is kind of part of the classicism. But the individual gestures then within that a lot must get lost in very different venues. Given that. Definitely.
I mean, that's not much I can do. I don't want to stand closer. But yeah. So.
What are you prioritising then in those gestures, like this room compared to?
Oh, it's the acoustic change of that. I guess it's the speed of the piece. You know, when you slow it down and speed it up a bit, just in a practical way, like you would. You know, for us, it's from a big cathedral or church or something in the centre. Gives you a certain breadth maybe with the piece. I certainly feel that in here. I didn't want to really push it. In a dry acoustic, you have to work much harder. You know, can be, if it's a piece like that, it can be really tricky and really demanding. Playing Xenakis or something. A dry acoustic is just exhausting, physically taxing. But in a nice big dry acoustic, the sounds go. Play everything just a little shorter, but hopefully without losing the power, any power in the piece. So, yeah.
What's the feedback like for you now? Again, because of volume, like you orally listening as you're playing, or is it kind of like I'm on, this is my experience, it's over. Oh, that's very interesting. I listen back to it.
Yeah, only in the pauses. Playing it, I don't think I have. The sound is it's just here. I mean. Where I imagine the sounds are playing is kind of there. Although it's out in the space, the connection with the sound isn't. That would take too long. It's more immediate. So I don't think it would be. I don't think that really would come into it, other than probably listening back or thinking after playing it, listening, getting some opinion about it. Yeah. It's too present. Right. Great.